Chris Stevenson of the QMI Agency, along with Steve Simmons and Rob Longley, and Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final. I guess the best way to begin is with the end, Rob, and looked like we were getting all ready to go to Chicago for a Game 7, and just a stunning finish to really was a stunning Stanley Cup Final.
Yeah, you know, for guys like Steve and I who covered the Toronto series in the first round, it seems like a month ago, but it really brought back memories of that, the way a game could end, you know. I mean, we were on our way back to Chicago. Bruins looked in control, 2-1 inside a minute and a half, and stunningly, the Hawks scored 2 goals to win the cup in 17 seconds. It's like, it's an ending that I'm sure Steve would agree. He's done more of these than you and I, that we'll be talking about for as long as they play the Stanley Cup.
And of course, we're honored to have Steve finally join us for one of our videos. It took one of the most shocking endings to a Stanley Cup Final that we'll probably ever see. But Steve, thank you for being here. And as Rob mentioned, your perspective on having covered a bunch of these, where do you think, as a body of work, this Stanley Cup Final winds up fitting into our history of finals?
Well, the first one I covered was 1981, so it tells you how long I've been watching or covering the Stanley Cup Finals. I frankly I don't think I've seen a better one. I've seen some that were probably equal to, or like 1987, I would say the Edmonton Oilers and Philadelphia going to 7 games when Ron Hextall won the Conn Smythe. Mm-hmm. Just a series that had all kinds of ebbs and flows. And that to me stood out. And Vancouver and the Rangers, when they played for the Cup in '94, I thought was, you know, just a tremendous series. But nothing. I don't think there's ever been a Stanley Cup Final that ended the way this one did, with a team scoring 2 goals, one with the goalie out, thinking that, oh, good, we're going overtime, everything's tied up, isn't that nice? Which is what the Blackhawks thought. And then bounce off a skate or a stick or something. I still don't know what happened. I'm trying to figure this all out. And it's in the net. And Chicago has the Stanley Cup. And I'm trying to sort of catch my breath here and take it all in and say, what happened in these 6 games? Because every 5 or 7 minutes they changed. It was fabulous hockey.
6 games that felt like 9 games, really. That's how good it was.
Well, the triple overtime to start with, and the games all had kind of such a different character. We had close defensive type games when the Bruins won. We had that 6-5 shootout with 11 goals when the Hawks won.
Right.
We had the grinding, incredibly physical game that extracted such a toll on guys like Bergeron and Taves in Game 5. So there was this whole, it was like a chameleon of the series. I mean, so many different types of games and momentum switches and everything else. I agree with you, Steve. It's got to be right there with one of the best finals we've seen.
And one of the things that I come away with is I'm, for lack of a better word, in love with both of these teams. Mm-hmm. The Chicago Blackhawks, as they showed tonight, just kept coming and coming with speed at the net all through the series. And the Boston Bruins, who you thought had like nothing left, were battling on fumes and guys hurt. And you could see tonight Bergeron could barely go and Yager could barely go, and their lineup was down to not enough players, and yet they were a minute away from going to a Game 7. And you have to admire Claude Julien and the job he's done and what the Boston Bruins are, and you have to admire, you know, Chicago. And Chicago wins the Cup, having beaten last year's champion in the conference final, having beaten the year before's champion in this, having beaten the perennial champion Detroit in the second round. That is a Stanley Cup that has some merit.
Yeah, I'll remember the character on both sides too. I mean, throughout the playoffs, the Red Wings had the Hawks down 3-1. We all may remember two series ago, and they rallied from that, and that was sort of their wake-up call. Boston's wake-up call was obviously against the Maple Leafs, but it was like, to use the cliche, it was never say die for either of these teams. And you could look at, I think, each of these 6 games and argue that either team could have won them.
Yeah, and there's a piece of irony, as you point out, Rob, that the way Boston gets out of the first round is the way that they were beaten tonight, and you heard it from the Bruins afterwards. Like, I heard Milan Lucic say that, you know, this is how we won round 1, and this is how we lose the Cup, basically.
And it was interesting. I talked to Johnny Boychuk afterwards, and he said, you know, we won in 2011, and I remember that. I think I'm going to remember this longer. He said the losing will stay with you forever.
Always does. We always remember when you're that close. Although we don't know what would have happened in the 7th game, and I feel a little cheated because I wanted like 3 more.
It was a final that deserved the 7th game.
It did. 7. I think the best of 9. I think would work for me. They don't have any players left by then. But still, I think it would. You know, this was This was spectacularly great hockey. Go to the first period tonight. The Boston Bruins came up at such a high level of intensity that you know.
There was no nerves from either team.
No, that's wonderful to watch.
Yeah.
When it's like when hockey's like that, it's at its best.
It was a great Stanley Cup final. It was our privilege to bring you the words and images of it. And from Boston, wrapping up now, Chris Stevenson along with Steve Simmons, Toronto Sun, Rob Longley of the Toronto Sun.